Warning. This video may potentially trigger seizures for people with photosensitive epilepsy. Viewer discretion is advised.
In 1981, the world suddenly became obsessed with archaeology. Why? Raiders of the Lost Ark was released, and the film gave the world a new hero, Dr. Henry Walton Indiana Jones Jr., the intrepid archaeologist who is undoubtedly still one of the most famous and recognizable characters of the film world. People were inspired by Jones so much they wanted him to be real. Some took this as a call to become archaeologists, while others began scouring history books in search of Jones' real-life counterpart. So, who was the real inspiration?
What's his name?
George Lucas created Indiana Jones as a tribute to the action heroes of his favorite 1930s matinee serials, but he was equally inspired by real archaeologists in history. So, here are some of Indy's prototypes. Sylvanus Morley. Even though he looked like the typical geek professor, Sylvanus, an American archaeologist from the School of American Archaeology, was capable of brave feats, especially as a spy in Central America for the Office of Naval Intelligence during World War I. Morley, who was an expert on the Native American cultures of the Southwest, first began exploring Mexico in the early 20th century. His interest was the Mayan civilization, and in 1912, he began excavating the city of Chichen Itza. Here, Morley found his bliss, and in 1913, his plan to start fully excavating the ancient city was approved by the Carnegie Institution of Washington. World War I, however, interrupted Morley's plans, but the patriotic archaeologist decided to use his vast knowledge of Central America and his cover of a working archaeologist in order to spy on possible German naval activity south of the American border. Morley proved to be as good of a spy as he was an archaeologist, and even though he never managed to find any evidence that the Germans were hiding U-boat pens along the Central American coastline, he did manage to chart thousands of miles of terrain and even continue to file intelligence reports until 1922. Even before his death in 1948, Morley was regarded as one of the world's finest Mesoamerican archaeologists. Giovanni Battista Belzoni. Giovanni Battista Belzoni was literally a giant of his age, standing somewhere around 201 centimeters. The Italian-born Belzoni first made a name for himself as a circus strongman in England. Belzoni, almost certainly a polymath, was an accomplished hydraulic engineer who built engines for exhibitions. It was this skill which brought Belzoni to the attention of Muhammad Ali Pasha, the ethnically Albanian former commander in the Ottoman army, who helped to establish modern Egypt. In 1815, Belzoni journeyed to Egypt in order to show the Egyptian ruler his hydraulic irrigation machines, but the Italian strongman and engineer wound up becoming one of Egypt's greatest plunderers, ransacking many ancient tombs and temples. What Belzoni managed to accomplish in Egypt was astounding. In 1816, Belzoni, using his great strength and skills as an engineer, retrieved a 7-ton bust of Ramses II from his mortuary temple at Thebes and sold it to the British Museum, where it still stands today. Next, Belzoni and a team of workers cleared the entrance leading to the Great Temple at Abu Simbel and entered the site. Belzoni would continue to explore the insides of Egyptian tombs, such as the burial chamber of Seti I, which is still occasionally called Belzoni's tomb. Belzoni also became the first modern man to set foot inside of the Pyramid of Giza. For many archaeologists, Belzoni, who helped to popularize ancient Egyptian artifacts in Great Britain before dying of dysentery in West Africa, is more of a grave robber than a scientist or academic. Funnily enough, the same charge has been lobbed at Indiana Jones. F.A. Mitchell-Hedges. Most Indiana Jones fans will agree that Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was disappointing.
You gotta get out of the library!
It's Squidward! What's he doing here? Here lies... Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. What a baby.
However, the story of the Mayan crystal skulls, which conspiracy theorists and dime store Fordians believe supposedly foretell the end of the world, starts with a man worthy of Indiana Jones. Frederick Albert Mitchell-Hedges was an English traveler and writer who decided to seek a life of adventure instead of attending university or any other institution that would give him a reputable name. Beginning at a very early age, Mitchell-Hedges began exploring the Canadian wilderness, war-torn Mexico, and Central American coast in search of the lost city of Atlantis. Mitchell-Hedges wrote about his travels, and along with his wife and his adopted daughter Anne-Marie, Mitchell-Hedges became a celebrity during the height of adventure journalism. Mitchell-Hedges' great find, the Crystal Skull of Doom, is a point of controversy. For his part, Mitchell-Hedges claimed that he found the eerie skull in the 1930s. Anne refuted this and claimed that she was the one who had found the skull underneath a Mayan temple in British Honduras. Going even further, Anne claimed that a Mayan priest had previously used the skull to kill his enemy, while in the hands of non-believers, it brought bad luck. Whatever the true story, Mitchell-Hedges believed that the skull was evil, and its finding has become the source of many legends and silly predictions. E. Hoffman Price. Price not only lived a life worthy of Indiana Jones, but he also wrote the type of stories that inspired George Lucas and Steven Spielberg to create the character in the first place. Described by science fiction writer Jack Williamson as a genuine soldier of fortune, Price was a California-born graduate of West Point, a veteran of 3 combat tours, the Pancho Villa expedition, the Philippines, and World War I, and a well-traveled fencer and boxer who happened to be interested in archaeology, what was then called Oriental Studies. At some point, Price settled down into a steady job in New Orleans, but he maintained his adventuresome spirit through his fiction. From the 1920s until his death in 1988, Price composed thousands of short stories that spanned several genres from action-adventure to strange horror stories that were frequently printed by the seminal pulp magazine Weird Tales. Price also had the distinction of being the only person to ever meet writer Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, and H.P. Lovecraft face-to-face. In particular, Lovecraft and Price maintained a close friendship until Lovecraft's untimely death in 1937. The pair even collaborated on a short story called Through the Gates of the Silver Key. Some of the characters that Price created which may have influenced the creation of Indiana Jones include the Singaporean detective Pawang Ali, Jim Kane, an American guerrilla fighter in the Philippines, and the French swordsman Pierre d'Artois, who often fought evil cult groups like the one Indy faces in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. William Montgomery McGovern. What New Yorker McGovern managed to squeeze into his 67 years seems almost unbelievable. In fact, McGovern could easily have been an inspiration for Indiana Jones, James Bond, Jack Ryan, and just about any other accomplished hero. In his youth, he traveled extensively, including to Mexico, South America, and Tibet, before collecting degrees from prestigious universities in Japan and Europe. McGovern was a professional academic for much of his life, holding a professorship in political science, lecturing at various times in government, Far Eastern studies, and military intelligence, as well as being a linguist able to speak a dozen languages. He served as a covert officer in the US military during World War II, and he also worked as an anthropologist based at a Chicago museum. His scrapes in the Far East of the 1930s, his popularity amongst his university students, and his language abilities are all strongly reminiscent of the intrepid Indiana Jones. Frederick Russell Burnham. Called He Who Sees in the Dark, Frederick Russell Burnham was a US scout and Native American tracker who made a name for himself in Africa as a British spy and adventurer. If he truly helped to inspire Indiana Jones, then Indy would have been the second fictional character touched by his larger-than-life legacy. The first was Alan Quatermain, H. Rider Haggard's heroic big-name hunter. On a stranger note, if history had gone in a different direction, Burnham would have been better known as one of the 2 men who first introduced hippopotamus meat into Western diet. While in Mexico with celebrated fisherman Charles Frederick Holder, Burnham uncovered large inscribed stone in the Yaqui River Valley that has since become to be known as the Esperanza Stone. The stone, with its bizarre symbols and unknown origin, remains a favorite topic of discussion among Forteans or the followers of paranormal researcher Charles Fort, who examined the stone as part of his book, The Book of the Damned. Hiram Bingham III. In Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the eponymous hero is searching for ancient artifacts in Peru. A real-life adventurer who successfully located and retrieved important relics from Peru is American historian, adventurer, and First World War aviator Hiram Bingham. Bingham is famous for having reached the ancient Inca city of Machu Picchu in 1911. Though whether he was the first to rediscover the city in the modern era is disputed by some. Machu Picchu was an important city of the ancient Inca Empire, built in the 15th century high in the Andes Mountains. Bingham studied at and worked for several of the most prestigious universities in the US. It was Yale University where Bingham took many of the precious objects he unearthed at Machu Picchu, and over the past decade or so, Yale has begun the process of returning some of these items to Peru. Percy Fawcett. Possibly, the individual most often touted as an inspiration for Indiana Jones is Percy Harrison Fawcett, a British Army officer, surveyor, and daring jungle explorer. Fawcett's life story reads like the plot of an adventure novel or action film. He served all over the world as an artillery officer, worked at one time for the British Secret Service, and was also active in uniform as a surveyor, explorer, and cartographer. He spent much of the last 2 decades of his life exploring the deep and unknown jungles of South America, going on frequent, long expeditions, while still finding time to serve on the front line in the First World War. For the last 10 years or so of his known life, stemming from his research and his studies in archaeology, he became convinced that the depths of Brazil's mighty Amazon rainforest was a lost city. He believed this to be the ruins of an ancient and once mighty civilization. He called this City Z. In May 1925, Fawcett, his son Jack, and his son's friend Raleigh Rimmel left Dead Horse Camp in the middle of the Mato Grosso region in the heart of Brazil to find Z. They were never seen or heard from again, and theories about their fate range from them living out their days with a remote tribe revered as kings to them being murdered. Fawcett was also friends with H. Rider Haggard and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So what do you think? Who was the inspiration behind Indy?
You just pick it up already!